Okay, so the story of how I got into aviation is actually quite a funny one. When I was about 12 years old, I think I had my very first flight as a passenger just on a Boeing 737, I suppose like very many kids do. And I liked it. And I was thinking about it, but I was 12, so I kind of put that idea aside and I thought maybe one day. I went through high school, and one thing that I really loved to do was ride my bicycle. I had a mountain bike with, you know, the whole shebang, disc brakes, and this was my passion. I was on that thing hours and hours every day, so that was my passion. And I kind of wanted to grow with, you know, apart from doing mountain biking, maybe also doing some racing on the road. So I asked for a racing bicycle for my birthday. And my mom was like, "But you already have a bicycle. Why don't you take flying lessons?" And I was like, "Really? I can do that?" So this was for my 15th birthday. So just before, my mom gave me my very first flying lesson at the local flying club, and I can still remember I met my flight instructor and we were going to go flying in this small little sports plane, an Aquila A210. The flying instructor had pushed another aircraft back into the hangar, but not completely. So the Cessna 150 was parked inside halfway, and the hangar door was hanging over the top of it, and he pushed the button to close the door. So this 3,000 kilogram door landed on this tiny little Cessna 150, and that was my very first introduction to flying. But you know, apart from that, like the flight was amazing, and of course the flying instructor was cranky, but it was just, I just shoved that all aside and took it all in, and it was so nice to fly, and I couldn't wait to actually get to the next lessons. And as I went through high school, I continued with my flying lessons, and on my 16th birthday I soloed. So yeah, that was kind of the start, and from that moment on my parents couldn't stop me, even if they would have wanted to. It's too late. You know, when you're a beginning pilot, when you're going through flight school, this is so easy. This is like the automatically igniting flame. Every single day you wake up and you only think about airplanes, airplane, airplane, airplane. And in that stage, you think that nothing could ever stop you from thinking about aviation. Once you start working, it does become a job. So what I noticed was, as long as things do not become routine and you can keep your interest varied, it kind of keeps on going. So what I do personally, I love general aviation, which ties in really nicely with my flying instruction. So you've got the freedom of being able to fly anywhere you want. You got the extra addition of having the challenge to teach somebody. Then I would like to combine that as well, and I have combined it in the past with airline flying, which again is a completely different routine. I like aerobatics. Maybe one day I'd like to become a bush pilot as well. So I think the key here is not to limit yourself to one very small, narrow niche within aviation, because it's such a wide thing. And if you can keep yourself challenged by going to all these different areas, you're going to keep it interesting. So my flying training is kind of all over the place. Because I started to learn how to fly when I was in high school, I already gathered quite a lot of flying hours before I even had the chance of finishing high school. Then when I did finish high school, one dream of mine was to become a fighter pilot. So I applied to the Dutch Air Force and went through the selection process, which at that time took about a year, because they had all kinds of logistical issues. So I was thinking, okay, like, what are the odds of actually becoming a fighter pilot? You know, it's a difficult selection. So being realistic, I thought, okay, well, you know, if I don't pass this, I want to have something below my belt. I want to, you know, have something done in this year. So I started distance learning, and I was able to get my instrument rating on top of my PPL. So I got full ATPL credits with the instrument rating as a modular student. So single engine IR. By the time I passed my single engine IR, they told me at the Air Force that I was good enough, but that they would not recruit a sufficient amount of people that year. So luckily, I had finished all of that. That year was not lost. Now I had the choice of, okay, how am I going to finish this? Am I going to go fully integrated? Which at this stage didn't really make a whole lot of sense, because it was just a few small steps to complete the full frozen ATPL. So I went to another airport in the Netherlands to finish my single engine CPL. And then I went to Sweden to another school to finish off the multi-engine piston class rating and the multi-engine instrument rating. And then I went to Oxford for the MCC course on the 737 full motion. So this was Oxford, the school, but the location was actually in Stockholm, Ireland. And then, funnily enough, after a year, the Dutch Air Force contacted me like, hey, we've got positions. Would you like to go for it? Would you like to enroll? And I thought about it for a while, and I was thinking to myself, okay, I can do this and it would be great. But again, the chances of me even making it through the complete training, you know, it's not a given. So I decided to continue with commercial aviation instead. They never do that, because in the military, you know, the standards are so high. It's nearly certain that, for example, 50% of the course will drop out. The upside of military aviation is that they will pay for all of your training, but I already paid for mine. So I could have given them 2 years and then could have enrolled, but at the end of those 2 years they could have told me like, hey, this is not good enough, thank you, but we wish you very much luck in the future. I decided like, hey, I already have everything, let's go commercial. When I finished my training, so this was in 2011, it was just a couple of years after the credit crunch. You know, you would send CV after CV after CV and you wouldn't get invited anywhere. Like, there were too many pilots. And somebody with a modular training, such as the one I had, you know, people were not looking for that. And I didn't have the contacts. Yeah, at one point I decided to start flight instructor training because I always enjoyed kind of helping people. I was a tutor in high school as well for just, you know, basic English, math, and all of those things. So I went to Spain to go and get my flight instructor certificate. And in Spain I met my current wife. Yeah. And we started to, she's Peruvian, but she was living in Madrid at the time. As our relationship advanced, we started living together, and we were nearly out of money. And my ratings were about to expire, so I had to go and revalidate them. And I told my wife, look, I can do this on a simulator, and it's going to be cheaper, but if I do it in the real airplane, then my chances of actually getting a job will be better, because I will actually have the multi-engine piston class rating as opposed to only the instrument rating. So despite the fact that we didn't have any money, my wife said, okay, if you've got to do it, just do it. So I called my local flying school and tried to make an appointment, and they told me, look, Joost, we don't have time. Okay, so I tried another flying school. And I got an appointment with an examiner who I'd never met before, and we went flying. And after about half an hour, he turned around and he told me, hey Joost, do you have a job? No. Do you want a job? Yes, please. So that was how I landed my very first job. It was just pure luck, being in the right place at the right time. And it was an amazing job because I got to teach on DA-42s out in Africa. So it was a Dutch company, and we had an African customer. 2 brand new DA-42s that I had to take there and teach on those for a year. Brilliant experience. Got to see a whole different side of the world. Met a lot of lovely people. As a general aviation pilot, I have flown single pilot, both visually and on instruments, and it's a very challenging environment. There's nobody to back you up. If you are not spotting something, that's going to be a problem. So that brings us to the next topic. How are you going to integrate that into a commercial environment, right? Because right now we are in a multi-crew cockpit and we've got two guys continuously watching each other. And on a regular basis, you will kind of spot these tiny little mistakes that the person next to you is making. And it's your job as pilot monitoring to catch those mistakes and stop those from developing any further. Of course, you are able to put in a whole lot of automation and kind of take away that risk element. And I'm not quite sure, because I'm not involved with any of the development of what that's going to look like. I imagine that they can do quite a lot. And I imagine that the workload can go down by a lot. But then again, you are still going to be alone. And I don't know how well a computer can catch those mistakes. Who knows? On a completely different note, I wouldn't want to be sitting in a flight deck for 5 hours without anybody to talk to, because I would go absolutely insane. But that's just me. I think it will take away a bit of the fun of flying, right? Because that's the interaction you have throughout the day. The person sitting next to you, you're the team together. And I think that you are going to create a whole lot of very lonely pilots. I can't choose. I've done general aviation, I've done bush flying, and I've done airline. And I don't think that I would like to choose. I mean, each of those will enrich you as a pilot. If you understand bush flying, then maybe one day you can use some of that skill towards your job in an airline. If you understand airline flying, maybe one day you can use that skill that you've acquired and do bush flying with that. I think it's the whole package, and enjoying every bit of aviation. So please don't make me choose. I'm fine with all of them. Having said that, the difficult thing about some areas of aviation is just, from a job perspective, it's much easier to make a living as an airline pilot as opposed to being a bush pilot. General aviation has a very wide spectrum. You can have the guy flying his little Cessna 152. He's not going to make any money. And you can have a private individual flying a Gulfstream 650 for a rich guy, and he might have a good income. So, from a job perspective, it's very variable. What do you need to support your family? From an enjoyment perspective, they all have their downsides and their upsides. It's all beautiful. So when I was out in Africa, we operated the DA-42s around the country. Low-level operation. That's the beauty of Africa. You don't have a whole lot of infrastructure, and you try to do with what you have. As you fly, of course, you will always run into little challenging situations. After having been in aviation for 50 years, I have seen some things. I'm still alive. For example, I remember flying out of an airport, I think it was Manchester, where we were starting our takeoff roll, and at about 80 knots we had a avionic bay open warning. So it's quite straightforward, right? It's quite calm. You say stop, stop, stop. Captain retards the throttles, and then you come to a slow taxiing speed, you vacate, and then you start to troubleshoot the door. So on that particular aircraft, the avionics bay door was underneath. Of course, if the warning comes on, you don't know if it's open or closed. It might just be a sensor, it might be completely open. In any case, if you're not past V1 yet, you'll stop and vacate and then try to troubleshoot. But you practice for a lot of these things, so it should be quite straightforward. In Africa, I had an incident where I had engine vibrations. So again, we stopped on the runway. Yeah. I remember when I was 17 years old, I didn't have a driving license yet. And me and my cousin, we were going to go from an airport in the Netherlands to London. So took our bicycles to the airport, no driving license. And that day the weather was quite bad, so it was a bit of a challenge. And we took a DA40 across the channel. And then we spent a couple of days in London, enjoyed it, and then came back again with challenging weather. And when you accomplish something like that, it's nice. It's being able to combine that. Other instances were, being able to take an airplane, visit family, come back, see the sunset in this, in a small airplane, because you've got the bigger windows. It's absolutely stunning to see. First solo, yeah, well, that was on my birthday. Because I had been training towards that moment, I kind of knew what was coming. I suppose many students don't have that luxury. They will just one day find themselves in the airplane with the instructor getting out and giving them the boot, like, go fly by yourself. But because I wasn't 16 yet, I think I've gotten to that level where I could have gone solo, but because of my age I wasn't allowed to yet. So on the day itself, I knew, okay, this is the day I'm going to go solo. The instructor got out of the airplane and I just did a normal circuit, enjoyed being free, and just thinking of, like, wow, I'm actually flying this by myself. I'm not allowed to operate any other machinery apart from this airplane. But other than that, everything was quite uneventful on that solo, which I suppose is a good thing. Well, at the moment I've got one EASA license, of course with quite a few ratings as an instructor, and then I'm waiting to get the local license, but that is quite a bit of paperwork. So it's in the pipeline, but for right now it's the one license. I'm approaching about 3,000 hours, and then as an instructor I must have done about 1,500 hours teaching on simulators, which I wouldn't include in that time. It's simulator time as an instructor. So you're in the environment, you're constantly thinking about the process, but you're not actually touching the controls, so I wouldn't say that is flight time. It's experience time, but it's not flight time. Very many. So starting out, I flew the Aquila A210. After that I must have done Cessna 152, Cessna 172, Cessna 172 retractable gear, Piper Warrior, Piper Archer, Piper Arrow, Cirrus SR20, SR22, SR22 Turbo, SR22 Turbo Normalized, the Fuji Aero Subaru. What else? I think Cessna Cardinal I've flown. I have flown the DA40 TDI. I've flown the DA40 with the AVGAS engine. I've flown DA42 TDI, DA42 MPP, DA42 NG. I've flown the DA42-6. I've flown CRJ 900, Beechcraft 1900D. What else? And some other airplanes that I probably can't remember at this stage. That's the thing about general aviation, right? One day you will rent one airplane and the next day you will rent another. You've always got these iconic airplanes, the childhood dreams. So you've got the P-51, it looks beautiful. You've got the Beechcraft Staggerwing, Beechcraft Starship. They're all amazing. Whether or not you'll actually get to fly those It depends. When I look at the airplane that I flew, I can say that I enjoy flying the DA-42 because it kind of feels like a second skin. I've flown that so much, I can feel that airplane. I know exactly what it's doing and I get enjoyment out of that. On the other hand, when you get into a jet and you feel that performance and you're able to master that and you work in a team, you get fulfillment out of that as well. I guess what I'm trying to say is that every airplane will have advantages and disadvantages. And I can't really say that I've got one airplane that I really love and that I wouldn't want to fly anything else. In fact, I enjoy having the new challenge as well. I suppose if I would ever have the opportunity, the 747. Yeah. I get it, so it's beautiful, you've got all that automation, it's a beautiful airplane. For me, I'd like to have an airplane that you can really handle. I can't say that a 747 will handle beautifully. I can't say that the A350 will do that. I guess I'll just have to try all of them, right? Favorite airport? When I think about nice trips that you could do, of course you can think about really big airports like JFK or London Heathrow, but for some reason I think about the airports with the beautiful scenery. So St. Barts, have you ever heard of that one?
You come right over the hill.
Exactly, I would love to do that one day. Another one I love is Koblenz in Germany, so that airport is situated on top of a hill. And then you've got the Mosel River meandering through the valley down below. And then you've got all the vineyards around that. It's absolutely beautiful. So, again, so many beautiful places. Innsbruck, yes. I have not been there. I've been to Geneva, which is also quite nice. You see the mountains in the distance. Yes, so I like scuba diving. Unfortunately, it's not an interest that you can easily combine with flying, and I have not been able to do it for quite a number of years, but definitely I would like to pick that back up again. I really enjoyed that. Right now I've got two little children. My oldest daughter is 6 and my youngest has recently turned 3. So they get a lot of my time and I enjoy spending time with them. Any advice? I would say try to really look at what you enjoy. Unfortunately, the aviation industry is really geared towards airline flying. And don't get me wrong, it's beautiful if you can live your dream doing that and visit all these beautiful places and enjoy time spending that with the crew. It's great. But if you're that person that loves to hand fly, or if you're the person that likes to have that challenge and go land on a riverbed, for example, then go and do that. You know, look at aviation and look at everything, because it's much wider than just airlines. Yeah, I suppose if you want to stay in the Middle East, you're not going to be able to do bush flying. But for example, if you want to have a more challenging job with more varied destinations, you can choose to become corporate or a private pilot. Every trip will be different, and suppose within the UAE there will be plenty of opportunities to do that. But you know, in that sense, I do understand that the aviation sector in the Middle East is not as varied as it would be in the United States, for example. But I suppose a lot of different areas around the world will have different types of aviation. If you're in Alaska, then airline flying is a very small part, and bush flying becomes a much bigger part. If you are in Europe, you will have a lot of flight training going on, and then the rest of it will be airline flying. Bush flying is non-existent. So I suppose, yeah, as a pilot you do need to travel, and since I became a pilot I've lived in 2 countries in Europe, I have lived in Africa, and I've lived in the Middle East. The downside of that is that you're moving around, you create instability for yourself and for your family. The upside of that is that you get to meet all these beautiful cultures. Being able to visit people in Africa, talk with them, share stories with them, understand them, celebrate with them, it's amazing. It opens your world. And then being able to go to the Middle East, which again is completely different, and do the same thing with the people here. I like to think that it has enriched my life, and I hope that it has enriched the life of my wife and my children as well. Being able to understand more of the world. So I definitely think that the hardest time for me was in the airlines, because I was away for 6 days and home for 4. At that time my youngest daughter was just about to turn 1, and my oldest daughter was 4. So it was quite a handful for my wife, and she was a champion. She managed all of that. I thank her a lot for that. So it's difficult, and I suppose you need to make the most of the time that you have with your family. When you're at home, try to really spend quality time with each other. Luckily right now, for my family life, I've returned to being a flight instructor, and I get to be home every single night. It's basically like having a normal job. So that makes life a lot easier. But still we face this situation where we are not able to live in our home country. Now, of course, some flight instructors will have that luxury, and they will live in the area where they grew up, and they will never have to think about that. But in the capacity of flight instructor, I've been in 3 different countries, and that has been beautiful, but also sometimes that has been challenging, where you want to be at home, or where you want to have that family time that you would have with your parents, or just being able to take your children and know that you can give them to your relatives, knowing that they will be taken care of as you're going to spend quality time with your significant other. That is something that we haven't had. But then again, we've gotten so many other things that other people will never have. Does that make sense? I definitely want to continue flight instructing, because I really enjoy it. I think it's one of the things that I enjoy the most. At the same time, I do think that at certain points you need to kind of take different steps and try to expand your vision. And I hope having those different experiences will then allow me to give more positive feedback and information to the students that I have, being able to share that with them, and being able to explain to them from a practical point of view why it is that we are doing what we're actually doing. Why are we teaching what we're teaching? So if you would be a flight instructor your entire life, you get into this routine. And if you can get the extra experience and show all the different areas, all the different aspects of the decisions that we're making on a daily basis, and I hope that will make me a better instructor. So will I ever give up teaching? No, although I do have to say that maybe one day I will choose to teach on the side and do another job as the main job, but at the moment I don't have any other plans. So I'm happy where I am. The company that I work for at the moment is a very pleasant working environment. It's a nice challenge. I'm learning a lot every day. So who knows?